Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion about what is the modern blueprint for platform engineering. This is for the big PlatformCon event that is coming up, and it is an exciting time. We are having this discussion today. We have 8 days until the conference. I'm your moderator, Alex Williams, founder and publisher of the New Stack. I'll be moderating this little event here. And I'm going to be talking with our panelists with some questions for them and getting answers to your questions. And that's a big part of this. We want to make sure that you feel welcome to ask questions. So you may ask them on YouTube, or you may ask them right here in Zoom. And we'll make sure that we get to them. So why don't we just go around and make some introductions? So why don't we start with Quiran and Anastasija? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, my name is Anastasija. I'm a platform engineer, originally started as software engineer. I'm a colleague of Quiran in bol.com, which is a Dutch company dealing with e-commerce, selling everything. So the shop for all us there. And Quiran and I have been in the business of internal developer platforms for, I think, almost 5 years now. Yeah. Quiran, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Quiran. I'm a software engineer at bol.com. Yeah. So also background in originally starting the DevOps space, and yeah, pretty much always involved in the sort of the technical infrastructure layer. So yeah, I guess that's a good intro for me.
That works for me. Kaspar.
Sure. So I'm Kaspar. I'm the founder of Humanitec. I've been doing platform engineering for a while now, built platforms. I'm focused on pretty large scale enterprise cases. I always say that because a lot of my comments come from that perspective. You need to know that I'm, really focusing on the enterprise. Super excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Juliano.
Hello, I am Juliano Martins. I am a senior tech manager in the team of a clouding platform in Mercado Libre. I'm responsible for some features and services of our platform called Fury. I will be giving some lecture about this, telling our history. And naturally, I am a nerd. I am since 98 in this area, and I love to talk and share knowledge.
Wonderful. We love it. We love it. Taras.
Hello, everyone. I'm Taras Mankovski. I'm CXO of a consulting company called Frontside, and we specialize in developer experience consulting. And I'm also a Backstage organization member, and I work with Backstage every day, helping companies make the best developer portals they can.
Ah, cool. Awesome. So what are we going to try and get through today? The first really focus is on what is the objective for PlatformCon 2023. And really that conference is to celebrate the tools, the capabilities, and the processes, which really helps end users, helps them with their productivity, and it helps reduce the burden on development teams. Now, I want you to know there's only 8 days left to register for PlatformCon, so please register at platformcon.com/register. And now let me just introduce the topic that we're going to be discussing. Now, if you're out there and you have anything to do with the cloud native community, you've probably seen the CNCF tooling landscape. It is overwhelming. I mean, I think I could like print it out and spread it out and make it into a rug in my house. It's huge. It's just, it's overwhelming in many ways. So we are talking about the platform engineering community and the high demand that there really is for guidance there, and really how to build these robust internal developer platforms, how to architect them, and which tools to use. And so some questions that we're coming up with that we're seeing come up in the community are which tools to choose to build an IDP, which tools fit well with each other. And there's other matters too. There's companies that might be using one specific cloud provider like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Azure. Others have a multi-cloud setup. We're seeing that become much more widely accessible, especially with virtual private clouds and just the ability to use APIs effectively. And they all have the question how to make a modern internal development platform out of their own setup. So I would just love to get started with a question about internal developer platforms. Maybe we can just start with you, Anastasia. What is a modern internal developer platform? What is it from your experience?
Right. That's a great question because one can really talk about it at length. And what I've seen so far, it's also quite specific to the company you talk about. Because looking at different size of companies, we've seen that for smaller companies, like UI templates, blueprints are working very well. But the moment you go into their enterprise, you do need a bit more diversified approach. And I say this because the moment you go big as a company, you have very different skills and types of engineers you cater to. So I think one cannot really give a straight answer to it. But I would say it's really from blueprint to CLI and everything in between.
Blueprint to CLI and everything in between. Okay, that's a lot. So maybe what we can do, Kaspar, is start with the blueprint. Tell us a little bit about your views on blueprints and the state of blueprints today.
Sure. I think the question is, how do we think about this in general? So the first thing that often comes to mind if we think about IDPs is, there is some sort of user interface and we're scaffolding a new service or resource. And as you say, absolutely correctly, Anastasia, that's only like a very small bit of the whole thing, right? And it's a little bit of a narrow focus. If I'm looking at I've the really fantastic platforms here at as Mercado Libre, then the scaffolding use case is really only a small element, and I'm not even sure whether it's the one that's providing the most return on investment. I think it's so important to think about these things holistically across the entire life cycle of an application. I also don't think you can really boil this down to tools, because the reality in the enterprise is multi-CI, multi-registry, multi-everything. So there is not that tool set for platform engineering. It's how you combine them. So, and I think about modern reference architectures in 5 planes, roughly. Plane number 1 for me is the developer control plane. And that contains, version control systems with infrastructure as code and maybe a workload specification. It contains a portal if you want this, the usual suspects here, Backstage and co. That's really where the different persona groups interact with the whole platform. That's plane number 1, the developer control plane. Second, the integration and delivery plane, which basically takes the request of the developer and now syncs this with the baseline configs of the platform engineering team. It's our CI pipelines, image registries, CDs, maybe a platform orchestrator element. Then we have the resource planes, the actual resource elements, the clouds, databases, clusters, etc. And then you have monitoring and logging and observability. So how do we deal with that? And last but not least, the security planes, policy layers, secrets management, and all of that.
Well, there's a lot there, isn't there? And the question
those 5 planes: developer control plane, every plane, resource plane, observability plane, and security plane. That's really in combination what together makes an internal developer platform. What tools are used? That might even depend on a team. The complexity of the organization.
I'm getting you cutting out a little bit here and there. Is that Kaspar?
Yeah,
but
sorry.
but that's fine. I think I got the gist of it. And I think the question that I like to follow up with to you, Taras, is about the teams, those teams that are really responsible for this, the organization itself, because I think we could talk all day about the tools and their capabilities and what a blueprint requires, but it often comes down to these teams, and these teams have been around for a long time. You know, there's been platforms that have been built for 10 plus years. I heard a presentation by Adrian Cockcroft about building out their platform engineering team at Netflix. So tell me about the teams that you're seeing emerge here. What are the traditional teams that are adapting? I want to get a perspective for people about the teams and what they can do.
When you think about the teams, are you thinking from like the user side or from the operators and the builder side? Like which teams are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking of 3 different teams in particular. I'm thinking of the platform architecture teams. I'm thinking of the application development teams, and then I'm thinking of the security teams. Because those seem to be like the core 3 teams that are the major constituents.
Yeah, I will add one other team, which you find really interesting now with the advent of developer experience becoming a big part of these platforms, which is the DX teams, because they're thinking about how to bring all this together, because that's one of the, and that's the team, those are the kind of teams that I can speak about the most. I can share some observations of the platform teams, and I think it's something that we interact with platform teams in the process of creating the developer experience that we want. But I think the one that I could speak about the most would be the DX teams, and I could share about that perspective if you'd like to hear about that.
Please do. That's such a critical part of it.
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of companies are realizing now that there's a need to curate the experience of using these platforms, right? Because there's so many different systems. Like one simple question is, do we give developers access to Terraform? Like, should developers be using Terraform? That's like a really easy question to answer. I mean, it's a common question. It's not easy to answer because it's unclear what the alternative is. And so it's the process of, so what DX teams are engaged in is the process of asking, what difficulties do developers have, and how can we remove that friction? And a lot of the conversations around modern developer platforms are specifically around identifying that toil and then removing that toil and making it easy for development teams to operate autonomously, right? Being able to having flexibility that they need to be able to do what they want to do, while maintaining and this is where the platform teams and the organization comes into the picture, is maintaining the alignment on the best practices and making sure that all of the security requirements are met, making sure that all of the observability mechanisms are in place, so you can provide the good developer experience on these platforms while also providing the observation mechanism the organization needs to know how things are going, how the organization is doing.
There's a lot of issues there, ranging from observability to monitoring and on and on. Juliano, I'm wondering, if you're thinking about this question about these organizational challenges, and what kind of problems are being solved now by getting the organization together? Like, what are some of the outcomes that you're starting to see from the wrestling with these organizational challenges, both in terms of the blueprint, the reference architecture, and other matters?
All right. Just in doing some relation with the previous answers, still related with teams. I believe that as big nerds, we tend to think about technical stuff every time, and so when we talk about our blueprints, we think in things like CI/CD, infrastructure automation, and API first, for example. But when we start to talk about to build or to buy a platform, we need to first ask ourselves and ask the company about our mindset, about our culture, and how does a platform will fit in this company, in this culture. Because I see several situations when people are working daily with DevOps, performing configurations, performing scaling, and etc. And when we move to a platform approach, maybe we will remove these responsibilities from these people. And so we are talking about a culture change. And people need to understand that talking about an IDP, we have two perspectives. The developer perspective, the platform should allow developers to create great solutions, but remove as much cognitive load from these developers as possible, and let people focus on the business, on the problems, and not on configuring or scaling a server. But we have the company perspective. The platform should help to improve governance and efficiency in terms of security, costs, performance, resilience, and time to market. And so something that I really would like to put some focus here, it's the culture related with the platform stuff, and do not let this in the road, because we can fail in build or buy a platform if we don't have a clear policy, a clear road defined to our company, to the company that will build or buy a platform.
Excellent. Quiran, there's a question for Sylvia, but we'll get back to the question for Juliano in a minute. But Quiran, I would like to just ask you the question then. Do you have any thoughts on what Juliano is saying about this journey? Like, what has been your experiences with journeys, and and like, what are some of like the unique takeaways you've come with architecting? What you've architected and what you've learned along the way in terms of that architecture.
So I think I can maybe just tie on to a bit on the culture thing. I think there's also, like, even if you talk about buying these platforms, or like implementing the platform, like the technical aspect, there's also an internal culture shift that has to happen, because I think up until before sort of the advent of platform engineering, we just built stuff and expected our engineers to use it, to our end users to use it. And I think that's what the sort of the shift that platform engineering does, is it, like, unlike everything else where our engineers can choose, like, you choose the language you want to use, you choose the framework you want to build your application in. The platform, like the tools that we offer as infrastructural platform teams, is there's no choosing. You just have to use what we give them. And I think that's the cultural shift that has to change within a company, is that both in the platform and outside, because the platform has to really think about, even if like picking the tools is one thing, but you really have to start thinking about, like, what you're offering, is it what your end users want? Because they don't have a choice. You have to really give them, you have to start thinking like where are the benefits that you can help them with, as opposed to just sort of shoving tools down their throat. It comes hand in hand with like both the IDP and making sure that what you offer through that IDP actually solves their problems, and that they want to use something as opposed to just being forced to use something.
Yeah, I want to add that I think now suddenly the shift is that we have customers as platform engineers, right? Because if you think, who are the platform engineers? Well, it's a mix of operations people that were very used to just trying to keep things very stable, and software developers. And suddenly you're giving them a new challenge. Basically, you have these customers, you need to make them happy. while keeping stability, security, auditability, and all those other asks in the mix. So I think that's also something we've really learned a lot about. So I think one thing we learned in our process was that we shouldn't abstract things too much, because by abstracting, you're kind of killing all the gains that engineers bring with them. So all that mental load that you're adding on their plate next to their day-to-day job, right? So let's say you obfuscate the tooling you're using to create your platform. Suddenly they have to learn way more, and that's very bad for user experience.
Boy, give me some AI.
Well, actually, something less AI, but very handy we've seen, at least in our company, and we've been really pivoting towards the Kubernetes resource model, because suddenly you're using Kubernetes' API to use a lot of the different cloud provider or third provider offerings within one simple way to access things. So of course, that's not tooling per se. It's more like a strategy or focus forward on single API, single access point. And then on top of that, you build some nice templating and UI offering. So I think that's a very valuable learning for us. So listening to your customers and actually try to solve their problems instead of shoving indeed tools in their face and being, this is what you need to use.
Yeah,
I think this is one of the biggest. Yeah, it's one of the biggest changes that I think platform teams need to go through is ask a question for a change. Like ask a question like what do your users actually like? What do you actually want? Like what do you actually need? You know, and then work back from that, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of companies struggle with getting the conversations about IDP started, because it's kind of hard to know where to start. And when you start to like certain things that we are talking about here, they're solutions, but they're solutions to questions. They're solutions to problems that you will learn about once you start asking your developers what they want. You know, because your developers will say things like, "I want to be able to, I need to be able to test this branch. So, what does a solution for that look like? I need an ephemeral environment. I want to be able to test things in." I want to be able to make sure that the change that I have, I can verify that it works with a whole bunch of other things, so you need to be able to change things in composition with other things. So these are kind of, and then from there, you start to think about what solutions can you put in place. And that's where I think what you'll hear at a lot of at the PlatformCon is you'll hear a lot of the solutions to problems like that. But I think for a lot of teams, or for a lot of organizations, the first step should be, is to ask like, what are your customers actually asking for, and respect that what they will suggest is actually a good idea.
So Kaspar, when you're asking these kinds of questions, because I'm sure you ask these questions a lot, what are the kind of answers you're hearing from customers? What are they saying back to you?
So I think this is such a new field that many people have problems actually articulating the problems they want to solve. And that's a difficult thing to work against, and you need to be very, very precise in trying to surface the pain points. So I think it's a little bit like, if you ask people for an iPhone and there is no iPhone yet, you'll probably not come up with an iPhone.
Well, you should watch the movie Blackberry then. Has anyone seen the film yet?
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's an excellent film, but it speaks to your point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. That's exactly that. Yeah, you're totally spot on. And so I think it's really diving deep. So many people that I'm seeing building ITPs is like management says, oh, our lead time isn't fast enough, or developers are frustrated. It's very often these teams get an incredibly vague mandate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very important that you take a step back and you are brutally honest with yourself. You do a return on calculation. You like to use. I'm very sorry. I think my wife is a little spotty. So I like to tell teams, take a step back and actually assess how often do you do certain activities with your developers and with your operation teams, estimated against a set of 100 deployments, for instance, right? And if you have that, rank, what do you actually need? What's the Is it the scaffolding use case? Is it the, I don't know, adding an S3 bucket to an existing workload? Is it that people are overwhelmed porting things from environment A to environment B? You know, whatever the answer is for your individual situation and organization, but spend a little too much time actually understanding the key pain drivers. I think that's very, very important. Too many people are just starting with, we need to improve DORA metrics. And you know, this sort of trivial sentence, everyone wants to improve DORA metrics. It's like, do you like ice cream? Yes, I love it.
Great. Listen, I want to get to Sylvia's, at least one of Sylvia's questions. And maybe we'll go to Anastasia on the question that, you know, who should sponsor an IDP? And I know there's going to be discussions about this at PlatformCon, but maybe we just give a little taste of what actually is needed, you know, for determining who the sponsor should be. Should it be the DevOps team? Should it be the infrastructure team? Anastasia?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. We were trying to answer it together with Juliano.
I see.
Yes, but in summary, it depends, of course. But what we have seen analyzing our user base, our users, we have 3 tiers. So we have people that really just want to get their infra up and running as fast as possible. So those are the sponsors or advocates for really having blueprints, easy, quick UIs. They have very standard use cases of what they want to provision. And then you have a bit more advanced or a DevOps group of users. And I think we take our infrastructure engineers here as well, because we like to use our own tools and we try to see if they're working for us as well. So if it's working for us, then we hope it's also working better for our end users, right? So it really depends. So I'm wondering if, Juliano, you want to add something here?
Yes, for sure. And maybe it's a little bit polemic because the sponsor will be the executive that will see the quick wins that a platform can bring you. And maybe you will have detractors in some teams like DevOps and in developers, because when we are talking about a platform, creating a platform or to buy a platform, we are talking about change culture, and some people do not want to change what they do. Some people will, for example, feel that now we have a platform and I will not touch AWS console, for example. And this is very complex to handle with. And there are many situations in the market that when people fail to implement a platform because they do not consider this. And for sure, a platform will bring a lot of wins, governance, releasiness, etc. But keep in mind, maybe you will have some detractors in the teams that you are supposed to have big friends.
Excellent. I want to pass on a question that we received from Mustafa, and anyone can answer this question. The question is about Terraform. What is the best approach in managing Terraform scripts for multi-cloud scenarios? And similarly, how can we best manage Helm charts, which use cloud-specific components? Anyone care to answer this one?
I can take a stab at it. I think it's
okay.
I think this question is, I think from the perspective of platform engineers, so people who are building the platform, this is definitely an important question. There's a few different options, but one of the things that I think it's one of those, I think it kind of goes along with what Kaspar was saying, where if you ask people a specific question, it can be hard to answer because it's hard to know exactly what you want. I think one of the challenges with with managing Terraform scripts is that, and the same thing with Helm charts, is that just Terraform scripts and just Helm charts by themselves is not enough. You need something that is going to orchestrate, like you need something that is going to glue together those two concepts. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of companies that are building, like they're really focusing on creating a good experience on the platform. Like there's some orchestration somewhere in the mix. So whether that orchestration is done through some ad hoc written scripts that are kind of providing some level of integration between those, the provisioning and deployment, like somewhere that needs to happen. And so in some cases, we're seeing companies, like very, very big companies, standing up teams that are responsible for building that orchestrator. But there's also, solutions like what Humanitec offers with their, essentially their SaaS offering of the orchestrator. But that's a really, but that's when you have an orchestrator, the question is like, how do you manage Terraform scripts and how do you manage Helm charts becomes much simpler, because you actually have a much smaller subset of what you need to manage, because a lot of the complexity is handled in the orchestration layer.
I think I'd like to add to that. So I think so this is the position that Bold.com found itself in. And I think this question also, the answer to this differs on the size of the company. So we were already quite big when we started looking at our journey to the cloud. And so we built that orchestrator. And if you watch out our talk next week, we'll discuss how we've gone from that orchestrator we built 5 years ago, which did exactly this. It wrapped Terraform. So it hid those scripts away from our end users, so they could just have this sort of like Kubernetes like YAML interface. They could throw Kubernetes YAML at our tool, and then in the background Terraform would run and provision resources, and that got us to a point. And so it's all about the journey that you're on. So where our company was 5 years ago, that was a good enough tool, and where we see ourselves today and what the demands of our end users, it's now no longer good enough, and now we're looking at alternatives to replace that. So things built on top of like Kubernetes, for example. So you start thinking of tools like Crossplane or KCC or whatever the case may be. So I think it's really true, like the question of how you manage Terraform or whatever the tool is in your company really differ. Like that, it's sort of that time in the journey of the company, what you need and how do you need to build an orchestrator, or are you small enough that you can manage it for a small amount of teams? It really varies from the size and the growth of the company.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't recommend for any company that is smaller than thousands of developers to build an orchestrator themselves. That is just that is too much to take on.
Well, we're getting into the second part of our discussion, and there's some questions I'd love to ask each of you. And if you could just keep these relatively brief, because we want to just make this essentially, this is the warm up for PlatformCon. So Kaspar, I'm just going to start with you. And you recently published a few white papers based on a blog post by McKinsey, and this in relation to reference architectures. Can you tell us more about that?
It's just something I came across and stuck out for me because I think we've been falling short of providing actual examples of reference architectures. So what are good? I wouldn't really go down to the tool level. It doesn't really matter what tools you combine. I said that before. I think it's very important. But really, like, what are conceptual architectures by scale of the company? Which I think, and Quiran, you're making an incredible important point here. This really differs wildly. Like, there is a reason why Bull.com would probably not use Heroku, right? Because you guys are just too big. So, the right horse for the right cause. But those reference architectures, I think we've, as an industry, we've been way too blurry about actual examples, right? And we need to get into that motion of, like, I've seen, like a really large amount of platforms this year. McKinsey is seeing way more, and they're actually showing a couple of those at PlatformCon as well. And this is really interesting to see, because they're saying, okay, real life example, financial industry, we've seen it a dozen times. This is what like a interesting architectural combination looks like. Now, whether you're using GitHub Actions as the CI tool or Jenkins, it doesn't really matter, right? But those are good reference patterns. So that's something that's, incredibly excites me at the moment.
Awesome. Juliano, now you come from the practitioner space and you built your own IDP. It's called Fury, as I understand. Did you use a blueprint or reference architecture to build it? If not, would it have helped?
Well, basically, when we started with Fury, the terms platform or platform engineering was not widespread. That was 8 years ago, more or less. And at that time, we had problems to solve. And naturally, building a platform solved them, or part of them. It's a long history that I will tell in my session in PlatformCon, but summarizing and to give some idea about blueprints, 8 years ago, we had an environment already based on microservices, in which developers had absolutely freedom. This made the company very agile. We have a great time to market. However, governance was compromised. We were inefficient in terms of costs and security. Things depends on individual developers' actions, for example, who had a high cognitive load. So total freedom has created some pitfalls for us. And how do we keep scaling this way? So it was necessary to create something to catalog our services. We need to provide centralized and controlled mechanisms to build and deploy applications. We need to standardize development stacks, monitoring and apply security and cost policies, among other features. So I just defined what we have in a platform. So with this in mind, we started to create Fury 8 years ago. And some blueprints that since that time we keep in mind is the cloud native architecture. One thing very important, self-service and automation. A platform must be self-service. And again, the API first design. And so we started to thinking in the company from where we can start. But this is a long history that I will share soon. But that's it. At the time, we don't have specific blueprints, but because we are starting with the business of platform.
Yeah, that's great, Juliano. And you've been doing this for a long time, so I'm sure you have all kinds of experience. I look forward to hearing what you have to say at PlatformCon. And I think then, Taras, I'd love to hear from you. Then Quiran and Anastasija, I have a question for you. And then if y'all have time, I'd love to get to, at least one of the questions from the audience. So Taras, you're one of the real Backstage pros. And can you tell us more about where Backstage as a portal would sit in an IDP blueprint? And for people who are not familiar with Backstage, just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Backstage is an open source platform. Backstage is an open source framework for building developer portals. So and I think that the part that's really important here is that for many companies that are using Backstage with their IDPs, which is we're seeing a very wide adoption now, it's pretty much becoming a standard. It's essentially the interface that developers touch when they're not in their editor or they're not in their terminal. So if you want to, and if you want to see information about like what other teams are doing, what other components can they use, where can I go to create this thing that I don't know about, like that's what they'll find in Backstage. And so what the community is doing is creating tools to make creating those portals easier, so that everybody gets a better developer experience, better user experience as part of the developer portal. So that's kind of a overview of Backstage. And what was the question before that?
Yeah, let me ask it again. The question was, with using Backstage as a portal, you tell us more about how it would fit in with like an IDP blueprint?
Yeah. So I would say that it's the interface. So the interface has essentially two functions: it's showing the information that surfacing the information from the platform that is available within the platform, and allow users an easy way to initiate mutations into the platform, right? So that would be and it's using APIs that are exposed by your platform. So we would say, so you have some service, some microservice, let's say, that is responsible for some function, and you would surface information from the microservice in your backstage. And if you wanted to, for example, let's say you wanted to deploy a new service or deploy a new instance of the service, you would add a button into backstage where the user can click to initiate that deployment. But the actual work of performing the work of doing the deployment itself would be done by some other service within your platform. So it really is like the external. So when they talk about glass pane to the platform, it's the seeing everything and then being able to initiate actions. It's just your kind of starting point into the platform. But it really is kind of like the cream at the top of the platform. It really is just it's the view layer. It's the V in the MVC.
Awesome. So for Quiran and Anastasia, you both come from the practitioner space and you built your own IDP. And I love the name. You call it R2D2. Did you use some blueprint or reference architecture to build it? And if not, would it have helped?
Yeah, Quiran, you want to do the first question and I'll do the second?
Yeah, so let's split it up. So R2D2 is actually our existing IDP that we're replacing. So this was built, I think, 2017, 2018.
Okay.
And, this is what when we went to Google Cloud with that, and I think it would really help to have something in place. But what we had at the time, it really served its purpose. So and it got us to this point that I was talking about. So our software engineers, engineers in our company can use it to launch and provision stuff. Like on the first day on the job, you can create resources. No one will stop you. So within a framework. But I think it got us to that point, and then you started realizing, but it's not just one type of person that uses your platform. And then I think that's where the like those things of asking yourself, like, who are the actual users? Like that's where it's very important. I think Anna, you can maybe touch on it, and like how we replacing it.
Yeah, exactly. So what we've learned in these years is we treated all our customers the same, but we've realized that not everybody fits the same mold. So have we had Backstage 4 years ago, I think that would have helped a lot. 80% of our users, as I was mentioning, they really have a very standard, typical blueprint sort of resources they usually provision. Think microservice or data science jobs or templates they would be using. And then you have engineers that have way more advanced use cases that don't fit this mold. So for those people, you do want to give them a bit more freedom within a framework. So I think having had those blueprints would have helped us a lot. For example, we would have not obfuscated as much as we did, or we have had a lot of attempts to make asynchronous systems look a bit more synchronous to fit those developers used to patterns, right? And if you think about modern cloud applications, they're asynchronous by nature. So you have to wait and eventually things will work, right? So I think learning that and looking back, there is quite a lot of improvement we're seeing. So personally, I'm seeing a lot of the software architecture patterns trying to be fitted or used in the platform engineering community. Something interesting I saw just recently was fractal architectures in the space of platform engineering. So that's something exciting. I think a software engineer trying to look at the both fields and trying to see how we are growing and evolving. I think since 1 or 2 years, we're seeing a lot of exciting things happening there. So maybe a question back to Kaspar. Can you name 1 or 2 really trends you're seeing there in terms of architectures we are seeing emerging there.
And could you also help answer a question, Kaspar, from there's two questions that are related to smaller companies and how they can, for instance, combine security engineering with platform engineering. There's another one about how you can adopt an IDP to smaller startups. So if you could just kind of pick and choose based on kind of your thoughts on what Anastasia is talking about.
Well, I think one of the interesting trends that I'm seeing is that the things that, I mean, for you guys, Bol.com guys, Mercado Libre, you are so far ahead. You started so early that if somebody gives you the question, is a reference architecture necessary? Not really, because you've developed that yourself, right? You guys are the early pioneers that have built these things, and now the mass of the market is following, so to speak, right? And for them, we all need to do a job. And I think this is why it's so valuable that you're participating in these conversations and giving back to make sure that we're not actually repeating the same mistakes. One of the things that you outlined that's very important, you said a very, very relevant sentence with you sort of realize that you can't do the one size fits all or stuff everybody in the same bucket. And I think that's so important. Good architecture designs allow for the system to grow decentrally, if that makes sense, right? So for instance, in a non-self-standardizing setup, you would say we offer these 3 types of Postgres, and then we offer S3 and take this or die, more or less, right? A setup that can learn decentrally, the user can say, well, this golden path works for me, but if it doesn't work for me, I know how to basically extend this and grow the system. And I can, if I think about platform engineering a lot in terms of repository structure. So I can actually send a definition of how to create a resource to the central repository, and the platform team can say, oh, this is interesting. We're going to make this global. We're going to support this going forward. It's a new golden path, right? So that's one of the things that I think is really so important. That's the one thing. The second thing is, I really like this idea of workload specifications. I spent a lot of time contributing to open source projects in that space in the last 12 months, because I think if developers are able to articulate in an abstract way what they need in general, and then we can localize this on an environment to environment basis, however we do this, then this is very relevant. Also to the question, like, should you have multi-cloud or any cloud-specific information in your Helm charts or Terraform? And the answer is, in my opinion, probably not. You should actually create application and infrastructure configurations with every release, and then actually localize this based on where this thing is going, right? And how you do this, is a different question, but that's a design pattern that resonates a lot. Now, to the question, small teams, my number one response is, please use Heroku if this is possible. This is, I think so important. And I think part of, being honest here is that if you can, and if you do not need to get into the crazy complexity that we have to deal with, then do not do this. Use a platform as a service, take the shortcut. I'm even a fan. Heroku has been around for ages now. I think it's even justified to follow your even service and architecture design to actually meet the requirements of those platforms. My personal opinion, right? If you need to use something as complex as Kubernetes, even Amazon is a complex, really complex system, right? Then I think investing in that separation of concern and consistency on how actually configs get created is something very, very valuable. But again, try to avoid having to deal with the problems that we have to deal with. It's tough shit.
Yeah, definitely. I would add, if you can get it for free, that will solve a lot of your security and other complexity. So just don't do it if you don't have to. Start small with few use cases, see how it goes, and then continue.
And maybe also to really, like, even if you do get to that position, so like as a company as well, we also challenge the questions of like, should we run all flavors of SQL type databases? Like, because for everything that you offer, you have to provide an SLA for it. You have to provide like the sort of, you have to provide the golden passport, you have to make sure that like it meets your auditing requirements. So maybe that's less of an issue on smaller companies, but the thing is, everything that you offer, you are responsible for. So it's really like be wise in what you offer, like, because that it becomes operational burden for you as a platform team. So even if you offer one thing and you offer it well, rather do that than offer a whole bunch of things and they're sort of mediocre. So really try and concentrate on like, and that's where it comes to asking your users, like, what do they need? Do 80% of your users really need that obscure database type, or can they get by with like sort of the more common things? Like, so really ask yourself, what do the majority of your users need?
There's
I
a
totally
question.
agree.
Yes, so go ahead.
No, well, I just want to add, do not fall in love by technology, right? Take care. I agree totally with Kaspar about using Heroku, because we saw several situations that people are moving to Kubernetes and just do not make sense. So think about the technology. Do not repeat our mistakes. Learn with who already built some platform, learn with the community, and start with a product mindset. Luca Galante talk a lot about this. It's great because if you start with thinking in your developers are your real clients, you will create a much better platform for sure. And again, start with small things. Do not try to create something very big and to solve all the problems that your company have. Find the quick wins. For example, automate some repetitive work, find something that will improve your security, resilience, and create products or use products that will help you with this.
And if I can say one more thing, adding up on this, Juliano, sorry, Taras, is that what Mercado Libre, I think you guys do very well, is that you understand, hey, it's a little bit 80-20. You will not be able to serve 100% of your customer base. That's just impossible. Like, there is a reason why there is no commercial vendor that offers support across Kubernetes and serverless and VMware and everything. You're not going to make it, right? So you need to be 80-20. And you will not be able to also please every customer group. There are a lot of developers that just don't want to be on your platform. And honestly, that's fine. Focus on the people that really want that and that are on you, I call it lowest common tech denominator. If you please them, you're doing a great job, actually.
This has been a great
question.
Oh, go ahead. Let's have one more and then we'll finish up.
Yeah, I just want to comment. There's a question that keeps coming up. I hear this over and over again. It's like, how do you sell the idea of IDP? And I think there's something that connects with what Juliano said, is that in my mind, you already have an IDP. Like, you don't need to sell it because you already have it. The question is it doing what you want the users to do? Because an IDP is a collection of all the tools the developers have to touch to do their work. And so, and I think what Juliano is saying and what I hear everyone saying is that we can, by making small incremental improvements to what you already have, you are making your IDP better. And it is much easier to sell to make a small incremental improvement to a problem that you're experiencing in your platform than selling this huge concept of having this monolithic improvement to your experience. So just focusing, like what Juliano said, like focusing on small wins and then incrementally improving the IDP that you already have. Was going to give you the results that you're looking for without having to try to convince many people of making a really ginormous investment into something that they don't maybe necessarily fully grasp complexity of.
This has been such an awesome discussion. Thank you so much to everyone out there who has tuned in. And remember, you need to register for PlatformCon 2023. There's only 8 days left. You can register at platformcon.com/register. I would like to thank our panelists for participating. Thank you so much for having your insights be so helpful to me mean, I know probably to many people out there. So Quiran and Anastasija, Kaspar, Juliano, Taras, thank you all so much. We'll see you at PlatformCon. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.